I remember the day John brought Charlie home. Charlie was our gorgeous, spirited stallion, and we were excited to welcome him as the new addition to our peaceful life on the ranch. I was a little unsure at first. I never thought I'd be a horse person, but John had always wanted to own one, so I went along with it, thinking, what could go wrong? As time went on, something inside me began to change. It was just the little things at first, like dropping by the stable to feed him, brush his coat, or watch him trot around the field. It was actually pretty peaceful. It was really quite therapeutic, as if he understood parts of me that no one else did. It felt innocent enough at first, but John started to notice that I was spending more time with Charlie. He'd tease me about it, but it was all in good fun. He'd say, "Victoria, you love that horse more than you love me," and laugh as he gave me a hug. I'd laugh it off too, not wanting to admit that maybe he was right. Maybe there was more to it than just Charlie. John and I had been drifting apart for months, and it seemed like he was more interested in his. We built our life together, but somewhere along the way, we lost sight of each other. I tried to tell myself it was just a phase, but deep down, I felt like I was drowning in silence. One evening, I stayed late at the stable, brushing Charlie's coat and chatting with him as if he could understand. I shared my frustrations, my loneliness, and the longing for something I couldn't quite put into words. Charlie just stood there, calm and quiet, with his big, gentle eyes fixed on me as if he could read my mind. I wish John could understand me the way you do. I lost track of time, but by the time I got back to the house, John was waiting for me by the door. His face was a bit of a mystery, a blend of confusion and something else I couldn't quite identify. He asked again, one night when we were in the stable late. His voice had a strange edge to it. I nodded, feeling a bit guilty for some reason. I tried to brush it off with a laugh, but John didn't join in. There was something in his eyes that night, like he was suspicious of me. "Victoria, I think you're spending a little too much time with him. What do you think, John?" I was taken aback by the seriousness in his tone. "It's just a horse," I said, forcing a smile. As soon as I said it, I had this strange feeling in my chest. I felt like I was lying to both him and myself in the days that followed. I kept thinking about what John said. "Victoria, don't you think you're spending a little too much time with him?" It should have sounded absurd. At the end of the day, it was just a horse. But as I went about my day, I had this feeling that John was noticing things I hadn't admitted to myself. On Sunday morning, I decided to step away from the stable for a bit, thinking that a change of scenery might help me think more clearly. I got myself caught up in household tasks, trying to ignore the nagging urge to check on Charlie. As the hours passed, the house felt emptier and quieter, as if something was missing. I finally gave in and told myself I'd just check on him quickly, maybe refill his water and brush his coat a little. As I opened the stable door, I could feel my heart beating a little faster with excitement. There he was, Charlie. He was standing tall and proud, his dark coat gleaming in the sunlight that was peeking through the stable windows. I reached out to stroke his nose, and as I did, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. "You're my escape, Charlie," I said quietly. I knew it might sound a bit silly, but in that moment of quiet, it felt like the most honest thing I'd said in a while. As I got lost in my thoughts, I didn't notice John approaching. Then, he spoke up. I was surprised to see him out of the blue. "Victoria," he said, in an oddly calm tone of voice. I turned around, my heart racing, to see him standing by the stable door. He looked from me to Charlie, his expression a mystery. "I thought we agreed you'd cut back on spending so much time here." "John," he said, crossing his arms. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice came out shaky. "I just needed some air," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. But John wasn't convinced. His eyes narrowed, and I could feel the tension between us getting thicker. It was like an invisible wall that neither of us could break through. "Victoria," he started, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "Is there something going on that I should know about? I mean, between you and him?" He trailed off, glancing at Charlie as if he couldn't quite bring himself to say it out loud. I felt my cheeks flush, and for a second, I thought about telling him everything, how I felt lonely, how I felt like I was losing myself, and how I'd found strange comfort in those quiet moments with Charlie. But I thought better of it. I was at a loss for words. That's ridiculous, I said, trying to laugh it off. He's just a horse. Jayan looked at me, his eyes searching mine. For a moment, I thought he'd let it go, but then he stepped closer, his face tense with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Why does it feel like I'm losing you? He asked quietly. I felt a pang of guilt that was deeper than anything I'd ever felt before. I wanted to reassure him and tell him it was all in his head, but I didn't have the words to do it. I felt torn between the life we'd built together and this strange new world that only seemed to say, I don't understand. I don't understand, Victoria, he said softly, his voice breaking. I feel like I'm watching you drift away, and I don't know how to stop it. I felt tears pricking my eyes, but I held them back, unsure of what to say. I wanted to bridge the gap between us, but the silence was thick with unspoken words. John didn't say anything more that night. He left me standing in the stable, and I could hear his footsteps fading as he walked back toward the house. I decided to stick around. I spent some more time with Charlie, but my mind was elsewhere. It was as if all the little issues in our marriage, the things we had both ignored for so long, had suddenly come to the surface. The next day, I tried to put it out of my mind. I got on with my usual routine, keeping myself busy with tasks around the house, hoping that John and I would sort things out between us. But every time we spoke, I could feel it, the distance, the unspoken question hanging in the air. I knew we had to make a change that evening. I decided to be honest and address the issue. Even though I wasn't totally sure what was going on, I waited until John got home. As he walked into the kitchen, I could see he was on his guard. John, we need to chat. He nodded and gave me a serious look, then gestured for me to sit down. I took a deep breath to calm myself down. I knew things had been a bit strange between us. My hands were fidgeting as I tried to think of the right words. I never meant to make you feel like I was losing touch with you. I said, my voice was barely above a whisper, but I was feeling lonely, John. I felt like I'd lost a part of myself. I felt like I was back to normal when I was in the stables and spending time with Charlie. John took a deep breath and ran his hands over his face. Victoria, I never thought I'd be jealous of a horse. He said with a sad smile, but watching you and seeing you look at him like that, it felt like I was losing you to something. I was surprised by how open he was being with me. I hadn't realized just how much he'd been affected or how much he'd been holding back. It was as if the wall between us had been broken down, and we were both able to see the pain that we'd been hiding. Maybe we've both been saying, I'm sorry, I said softly, reaching out to take his hand. I got caught up in my own feelings and I should have come to you first. I just didn't know how to handle it. He gave my hand a gentle squeeze, and his expression softened. I suppose we've both been avoiding the issue in our own ways. Perhaps it's time for us to start finding our way back. We sat there in silence, letting the weight of our unspoken words settle between us. I realized that what I had been looking for was right here, sitting across from me, not in some other place. Perhaps it's time we find something we can both escape to together. John finally spoke up with a small smile tugging at his lips. In that quiet kitchen, with our hands clasped in the first honest conversation we'd had in a long time, I knew we were taking the first step back to each other.